I've got this sort of downy hair developing on my chest. Is that normal? Also, I get so lonely and confused. I've written a poem about it. Maybe you'll understand. Why do nice girls hate me? Why
Get out, you nauseating adolescent!
Welcome to episode 7 of the Blackadder podcast, where Ian, I'm looking for some advice. Why do nice girls hate me?
Well, there are very many reasons. Where do you want me to start?
I prefer naughty girls anyway.
Fair enough. Who wants the nice girls if you prefer the other ones?
Indeed. On to season 3.
Absolutely, we're racing through this.
We are.
Yeah. Although we've got season 1 to go back to.
We haven't forgotten about you.
No. People who are wondering if we were going to do it after Blackadder 2, no. But we will get there.
Yep. And if you are wondering, you should have listened to the introductory episode. That would have explained all, like Clarissa.
Well, we didn't say when we were going to circle back around.
Yeah, we did. Said it at the end.
Did we?
Yes.
Okay, well that's when we're doing it.
So Ian, before we begin this week's episode, you fancy giving the listeners a little bit of context? Where are we? Bring us up to speed.
Well, last time out we left Blackadder in the Elizabethan era, and a lot has happened. Unfortunately, I can turn to the Blackadder Chronicles for a bit of an update on what the Blackadder dynasty has been up to in the meantime.
Go for it.
So obviously over the following 300 years, the Blackadders, we're told, continued their ruthless, cruel and uncompromising attempt to become the most hated family in Europe. In this, however, they were no match for the Stuarts. Now, students of history and most people who ever took any history class at all will know that the Stuarts succeeded the Tudors. Eventually, they themselves were deposed, restored, etc., etc. Throughout this period, the Blackaders switched sides back and forth, keeping themselves in favour, and indeed it is suggested that Lord Blackadder himself executed Charles I.
Oh, who suggests that?
The Blackadder Chronicles suggest that.
Must be true.
Must be true. Nobody else is claiming it. There was a very famous Duke of Blackadder who was in the favour of Queen Anne.
Was he grand and old and from York?
Well, apparently he was...
I only know 3 dukes.
He was promised that whenever he won his first battle, he would get a palace named after it, which could be the reason he lost the Battle of Shithole in 1703. Following this, we obviously get the Georges, Kings George 1, 2 and 3, and we rejoin our dastardly dynasty, the chronicles tell us, with the Blackadders having fallen on rather hard times. Where once they had been lords and dukes, the latest of their number is scraping a living as a butler to the Prince Regent, the stupidest man in England. Well, that's not true. Baldrick is hard to beat.
Yeah, and the reason that the Prince George is in his position is because his father is incapable.
Well, if people have seen the movie The Madness of King George, that was the Prince Regent's father. So essentially the Prince Regent is the monarch. He's acting as monarch. Mm-hmm. He is to all intents and purposes the king, and ultimately does become the king in the future. He's the son of George III and he would become George IV. So the regency period is, well, his father's still alive, but he's in charge before he becomes king. It was technically 1811 to 1820. And we've got some familiar characters. You might get to know them in the first scene. We've got a Mrs. Miggins you might have heard of.
Yes, we finally get to see.
We've got Blackadder and Baldrick, but no other returning characters at this stage.
Okay, thanks for that little history update, Ian.
We're right up to speed.
We are, so we can get stuck into this week's episode.
Sure. Do you want a summary?
I do. Do you have one?
Yes. I mean, even though I've been talking for this entire podcast so far, I have a summary to fill in.
Well, crack on.
When Pitt the Younger sweeps to power in a general election with a mandate to impoverish the lavish Prince Regent, Blackadder must devise a plan to stop the Prime Minister in his tracks. While relying on Baldrick may seem like a foolproof idea, things don't quite go as anticipated, and an emergency appointment to the House of Lords is soon required. Will Blackadder finally restore the dignity his family name has lost, or is there to be a turnip for the books?
Thank you.
Okay, the credits have changed this year.
We are in a library,
Yes, the books are all sort of Blackadder-y themed.
The credits themselves are in the spines of the books.
They are. And the music's slightly different. It's the same tune, but played a different instrument.
Did you catch any of the titles of the books?
I mean, I did as I was watching. I didn't write them down or recall them.
As I watched it, I thought, I can't be bothered writing these down. Ian will have them.
No, sorry.
Okay. We begin this week in Mrs. Miggin's kitchen. Blackadder starts with a poignant speech about how, after the general election, they can now return to normal. Now, this episode it's very apt for the political climate we find ourselves in today, in 2017.
Well, absolutely, yeah.
The comedy in here, some of the outrageous claims and comedic suggestions don't seem quite as ridiculous as they maybe did when they were written.
Absolutely not. And my understanding is that this episode actually has been replayed on election nights from time to time.
Indeed, yeah.
Some of the fantasy, as it were, is much closer to reality than we might like.
Yeah, and some of the attitudes.
Yeah, even if you look at the names of the parties.
Now, Mrs. Miggins doesn't even realise that there has been a general election. What does Blackadder say?
Well, he's not surprised because she's not eligible to vote, so why would she be aware of it? In fact, hardly anyone is eligible to vote.
Why is she not eligible?
Well, she's a woman, but also peasants, chimpanzees, lunatics and lords are excluded.
Yeah, he says that Manchester has a population of 60,000, but an electoral roll of just 3.
Mrs. Miggins thinks this is unfair, and it's going to change.
Yeah, she puts herself down. She says even with the brain the size of a sultana, she understands the inequality here.
Yeah, but Blackadder is quite correct here when he points out that giving people like Baldrick the vote drags the country backwards, essentially, because they're uncivilised. You only have to look at the Brexit vote to see what can happen in these circumstances.
Yeah, he claims it's the way things are. You get toffs at the top, plebs at the bottom, and Blackadder in the middle making a fat pile of cash out of both of them.
So he says. Mrs. Miggins again, sorry, I think I touched this earlier, she says things are going to change. But Blackadder says it's not likely because Pitt the Elder is Prime Minister and he's not the sort of man who makes things change.
No, he claims that he is as effective as a cat flap in an elephant house.
I mean, in reality, Pitt the Elder left office in 1760 and died in 1778, which were both well before the Regency. But yeah. I think it works anyway.
We head immediately to the House of Commons or Parliament.
Yes, Pitt the Younger is now Prime Minister and he has 3 new legislative priorities.
What are they?
Number 1, he wants to wage war on Napoleon Bonaparte and France.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, he wants revenge on his old geography teacher.
What's the geography teacher's name?
Banana Breath Scrigshanks.
Scrigshanks. Watching this for years before we had the internet, I could never make it. I thought it was Crookshanks or something, but Scrigshanks is an odd name.
There's a lot of odd names in Blackadder.
And the way Banana Breath is pronounced is not as clear as it could be.
No. But now we get the joke.
Yeah. And the third?
Defunding the sort of opulent and lavish Prince Regent.
Why?
Because he spends a lot of money, including £15,000 a year on banqueting, £20,000 a year on perfume, and in the last year alone, £59,000 on socks.
So we head over to the Prince's... Is it a palace? Is that what we're going to call it?
I just had the Regent's Chambers, but whatever you want to call it, yeah. Probably Buckingham Palace.
You think?
Well, he's essentially the king.
Yeah, but when was Buckingham Palace the home?
Ooh.
I'm not sure if that would have been used back then.
I don't know. Well, it might have been.
The home of the monarch?
Maybe our audience can inform us on this.
Yeah, not stopping the recording.
It's not important enough. Did you like actually at the end of that previous scene, just after he finished his speech, he asked the leader of the opposition to test him on some Latin for the upcoming test. He's unfortunately become Prime Minister right in the middle of his exams.
Blackadder enters the Prince's palace with the news of a crisis for the Prince himself.
It becomes apparent what's happening to the Prince's socks and why his spending is quite so high.
Yes, it is suggested by him that the only explanation can be that someone is breaking in the middle of the night, stealing them and then selling them off. Now, how do we realise that this might be more accurate?
Well, Blackadder grins widely and says that only the 2 of them have access to the socks, so that's not possible.
I think it's a nice way of letting us, the audience, know what type of character Blackadder is in this third season.
Yes, he's an underpants thief.
The Prince also states that socks are like sex. Tons of it about, but he never seems to get any.
There's a great line in this scene. Blackadder explains to him that there's a bill in Parliament to bankrupt him by removing him from the civil list, and that if that happens, he won't be able to get any socks. And he replies, I haven't any socks at the moment. I think he's great.
He then also suggests it won't happen. The public love him. Only the other day, they were shouting, "We hail Prince George! We hail Prince George!"
He's swiftly disabused of this notion.
What were they shouting?
We hate Prince George.
Yeah, that's not so good.
No.
Blackadder, however, has a plan.
Fortunately, the numbers in the Commons are exactly equal. If we can get one more MP to support us, then you're safe.
Hurrah! Any ideas?
Well, yes, sir, there is one man who might just be the ace up our sleeve. A rather crusty, loud-mouthed ace named Sir Talbot Buxomley.
Never heard of him.
That's hardly surprising, sir. Sir Talbot has the worst attendance record of any member of Parliament. On the one occasion he did enter the House of Commons, he passed water in the Great Hall and then passed out in the Speaker's chair. But if we can get him to support us, then we are safe.
Well, what's he like?
Well, according to Who's Who, his interests include flogging servants, shooting poor people, and the extension of slavery to anyone who hasn't got a knighthood.
Excellent. Sensible policies for a happier Britain.
However, if we're going to get him to support us, he will need some sort of incentive.
Anything in mind?
Well, you could appoint him a High Court judge.
Is he qualified?
He's a violent, bigoted, mindless old fool.
Sounds a bit overqualified. Well, get him here at once.
Certainly, sir. I will return before you can say anti-disestablishmentarianism.
Well, I wouldn't be too sure about that. Anti-disabilismin... Anti-stits...
We return 2 days later and the Regent is still struggling to pronounce anti-disestablishmentarianism.
Blackadder arrives with Sir Talbot Buxomley, an obnoxious oaf who dines off his servants.
Yes, literally off their backs.
Why spend good money on furniture when you've got servants standing idle? Now, his attitude there and what we heard in the previous clip is what I was referring to earlier in the podcast. I don't think these attitudes, well, obviously, it's still a little bit of a caricature. There's certainly people out there who would not be as offended as they should be.
No, I mean, they wouldn't maybe have food eaten off the backs of a servant, but they would be happy for people to pay for their duck sheds and stuff like that.
In any case, Buxomley agrees to support the Prince, but after numerous backhanded compliments, he sits down. Can you remember some of the compliments?
He says that it doesn't bother him that the Regent dresses like a mad parrot and talks like a plate of beans negotiating their way out of a cow's digestive system. He also mentions that it's no skin off his nose that there are bits of lemon peel floating down the Thames who would make better regents than him. And the fact is that he is the Regent appointed by God, and he will stand by him forever, though infirmity lay him waste, and ill health curses his every waking moment.
So after this, he sits down, and the Prince starts to reciprocate.
Yeah, well, he talks down this suggestion of ill health. He says he looks like a fine figure of health and he'll be fine, there's no problem. But
as he's doing this,
yeah,
we see Blackadder start to look suspiciously at Buxomley and he walks over. What's happened?
He's just died.
Yes.
He just sat down and he died.
Blackadder jumps into action. They have to move quickly. Now, luckily, Buxomley's constituency is a rotten borough, to which we have a fantastic response from the Prince.
What does he say?
Have a go yourself.
All I've got is that he does a chicken impression. I didn't know the first part of it.
He says, well, what he says is, well, that's lucky him, lucky him, luck. And you see Blackadder just staring at him. He has to admit he doesn't know what a rotten borough is. He just didn't want to hurt Blackadder's feelings.
Blackadder's forming a plan. They think that the electorate and the land could be acquired.
Yeah, he goes on to explain what a rubber button is.
And it turns out he's actually, even prior to the death of the MP, acquired £1,000 from the Regent for the purpose of this.
So explain what a rubber button actually is.
My understanding is it's where one person or one interest group controls the entire or the majority of the electorate, so they can dictate what's happening with regards to representation.
Yeah, generally the landowner, he controls
Yeah.
the voters and the MP. Now, apparently this constituency consists of 3 mangy cows, Colin the dachshund, and a small hen in his late 40s.
The regent's excited about Colin.
Yeah, he would be.
Yeah.
Nice little dog, if that's what you're
Absolutely.
into.
Yeah, if that's your thing. He doesn't think it's a dog at first, he thinks it's a person.
There is only one voter, so Blackadder suggests buying the place and controlling the voter themselves, or himself. So, he needs £1,000. Can you remember what for?
Buying land?
Not window tax and swamp insurance, etc.
Etc. There's additional charges, yes. It's taking more than he really requires.
The bigger issue is, however, they have to choose an MP.
Precisely, sir. The only question is who to choose as MP.
Tricky.
What we need is an utter unknown, yet someone over whom we have complete power. A man with no mind, with no ideas of his own. One might almost say, a man with no brain.
Any thoughts?
Yes, Your Highness.
Rang, my lord.
Meet the new Member of Parliament for Dunny on the Road.
But he's an absolute arsehead.
Precisely, sir. Our slogan shall be, a rotten candidate for a rotten borough. Baldrick, I want you to go back to your kitchen sink, you see, and prepare for government.
Yeah, Baldrick is a prime candidate, I would suggest, if the intention is to have him manipulated by the landowner anyway.
Without a doubt. We head down to the kitchen, and Baldrick has to, with the aid of Blackadder, fill in the MP application form.
One of the questions is a bit challenging for him.
Yeah. What's his first name?
He doesn't know.
What does he think it might be?
He thinks it could be Sod Off, because when he was in the gutter playing with the other snipes, he would say, "It's me, Baldrick," and they would say, "Yes, we know, Sod Off, Baldrick."
There's also a question about insanity in the family. Blackadder thinks it's easier just to cross out the in part of insanity.
Yes, and confirm there's no history of sanity.
They also have to make up some criminal activity.
Yeah, so he will fit in with the other MPs, obviously.
Yeah, quite right. And we then find out about a vegetable fascination of Baldrick's. What is it?
Well, it starts off when Blackadder asks him about his minimum bribe level, and he says 1 turnip, but he doesn't want to price himself out of the market. But it turns out that all of his life's ambitions do revolve around the acquisition of turnips.
What's his dream turnip?
Well, if he got £1 million, he would get a big turnip in the country.
Yeah. Oh, wouldn't we all?
Yeah. He's asked to sign, and literally signs on the hand that's pointing at the place to sign. So Blackadder stamps that down, that works, and the door goes.
Yes. Upstairs, Pitt the Younger enters and is immediately patronised by the Prince until Blackadder informs him he is in fact the new Prime Minister.
Yes, and Blackadder himself, though, even attempts to take advantage of Pitt's young age.
In what way?
He offers him a treat. I think, is it jelly, maybe?
Yeah, I think he initially reacts to it by asking which flavour.
Yeah, he's tempted, but when he discovers it's blackcurrant, he rejects the proposition.
Yeah. The Prince finds it hard to believe that this snot-nose is actually the Prime Minister. What does he say he used to do to his type when they were at school?
They would line them up and use them as a toast rack. And Pitt's not surprised, because it was once him in the cold schoolroom with the crumpet between his cheeks.
Yeah, burning with shame. And that is why he has been spurred on to fight against privilege.
And sloth. He's going to run a candidate against them in Dunny-on-the-Wold.
Yeah, his own brother.
Pitt the toddler.
Well, Blackadder asks who is, Pitt the toddler, the embryo or the glint in the milkman's eye.
After Pitt leaves, Blackadder's quick to reassure the regent that they will in fact win. There's a couple of reasons.
Yes, there is, but it's primarily because they're going to cheat.
Yes, that's the main one. We jump to the election results.
Yeah, we're over to the polls, and Mr. Vincent Hanna announces that the turnout has been very good. In fact, he turned out before breakfast.
The exit poll has produced a 100% result for Mind Your Own Business, You Nosy Bastard.
Yeah. Hannah then speaks to the Prince and Colin.
Yes, the regent's made friends with Colin now, and appears as the leader of the Adder party.
Yes, he's not happy I mean, they've paid for this seat, and he thinks it's a bloody liberty that they have to stand for it as well.
Baldrick shows up, but he's been apparently gagged by Turnip,
Yes.
so Blackadder will speak for him.
And he's no personality.
Yeah, well, that's what Blackadder explains. Baldrick doesn't have a personality, so that's why they fought on the issues. And when he's asked what the S stands for, he says, sod off.
The results are then announced, and we hear that Baldrick has won by a landslide.
Yes, none of the other candidates got any votes, and Baldrick scored 16,472. And if you go onto Wikipedia entry for this episode, you'll see that result laid out in the way that Wikipedia does election results normally.
So Hannah then catches the candidates as they come off the stage.
Master William Pitt the Even Younger, are you disappointed?
Yes, I'm horrified. Smeared my opponent, bribed the press to be on my side, and threatened to talk to the electorate if we lost. Failed to see what more a decent politician could have done.
Quite. Now, I vote again. No votes at all for the standing at the back, dressed stupidly and looking stupid party. Are you disappointed?
No, not really, no. I always say if you can't laugh, what can you do?
Take up politics, perhaps. Has your party got any policies?
Oh, yes, certainly. We're for the compulsory serving of asparagus at breakfast, free corsets for the under fives, and the abolition of slavery.
You see, many moderate people would respect your stand on asparagus, but what about this extremist nonsense about abolishing slavery?
Oh, we just put that in for a joke. See you next year.
And now, finally, a word with the man who is at the centre of this by-election mystery, the voter himself. And his name is Mr. Mr. Blackadder, you are the only voter in this rotten borough.
Yes, that's right.
How long have you lived in this constituency?
Since Wednesday morning. I took over from the previous electorate when he very sadly, accidentally, brutally cut his head off while combing his hair.
One voter, 16,472 votes. A slight anomaly?
Not really, Mr. Hanna. You see, Mr. Baldrick may look like a monkey who's been put in a suit and then strategically shaved, but he is a brilliant politician. The number of votes I cast is simply a reflection of how firmly I believe in his policies.
Well, that's excellent.
Back in Mrs. Miggin's kitchen, Blackadder declares this a triumph for stupidity over common sense, and grants Baldrick a holiday.
Yes, this is fantastic. He says, why don't you take a short holiday? Pauses for a beat and then says, did you enjoy it? Back to Parliament.
Yes, Baldrick needs to vote to support the Prince here, but he doesn't know how.
Being the newest MP, he is confused and doesn't know what to do. Unfortunately for him, Pitt the Younger is there to lend a hand. So we're back to the palace, and a smug Pitt enters.
He's greeted by Blackadder, who says, well, if it isn't the Lord Privy Toast Rack.
However, his laughter is short-lived as he's dismayed to discover that they lost the vote. And he's told that Baldrick voted for the opposition.
Yes.
And he says straight away, if you want something done properly, kill Baldrick before you start. Now, we discussed this in the previous season, that on a few occasions, Baldrick was given some important tasks to do.
Yeah.
And he carried them out, without any issues.
He did.
So this is a sort of sea change here, where you see him now becoming the complete imbecile that we...
Yeah. To be fair, in the House of Commons, he knew what he had to do, he just didn't know how to do it. He did say he was there to support the Prince.
Sure, but what we heard there is Blackadder acknowledging the fact that he can't trust Baldrick, whereas previously he was able to trust him. He didn't think that would be a problem.
I think we get a good example next episode. The Prime Minister gives Blackadder and the Prince Regent 24 hours to get out of the palace.
But Blackadder responds by saying that 24 hours is a long time in politics. We can perhaps chat about where that may have came from.
Sure.
At the end of the show.
The clip we heard at the top of the show follows, at this point, the adolescent concerns of the Prime Minister.
Yes, I think it's just trying to show you that, he might well be the Prime Minister. He is still very young.
Very young, that's
and
why
insecure.
It's his name. Yeah, and insecure, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Back down to Mrs. Miggins's.
She's roasting Baldrick on a spit.
As Blackadder laments his own stupidity, and Mrs. Miggins is quite helpful. She mentions the House of Lords.
Yes, and occurs to Blackadder that there's no problem because the House of Lords will absolutely vote this bill down. And not only that, he can now trick the prince into making him a lord.
Yes, he said he's got a plan so cunning you could put a tail on it and call it a weasel. Back at the palace, Blackadder returns in confident spirits to let the prince know that there's good news.
Ta-da!
Oi! Tally-ho, Blackadder! You look as happy as a man who thought a cat had done its business on his pie, but it turned out to be an extra big blackberry. Did our plan go well?
Excellently, sir. Order 1,000 pairs of finest cotton socks. Take out the drawings for that beach hut at Brighton.
Hurrah!
There was, however, one slight hiccup.
No, cough, I think you mean.
Yes, sir. Hiccup. The motion about your impoverishment has now moved on to the House of Lords.
Oh, bravo! Well, no worry there then. Every man jack of them will be behind me.
Ah, would that were so, Your Highness. These are treacherous times.
Are they?
Yes, it might be wise to appoint a new lord to make sure the old lords vote the right way.
Good thought. New lord. Any idea who?
Well, sir, one name does leap to mind.
Does it?
Yes, sir.
Couldn't make it leap any higher, could you?
A young man in your service, sir, who has done sterling work matching the political machinations of the evil pit.
I didn't get this. Blackadder's demonstrated throughout this episode that he's well aware of the regent's dim-wittery and lack of common sense or understanding of ordinary things. Mm-hmm. So why would you use hints and innuendo to try and get something done instead of just telling him?
Because maybe he thinks in the long run it is better for him if the prince thinks he thought of it himself.
Yeah, no, absolutely, but can he really... I suppose at this point he thinks he has got his message over.
Yeah. A mistake was
A
made
mistake,
there.
yeah. Schoolboy error.
At this point, however, he's happy that he thinks the prince has taken the hint. And Blackadder then suggests some bribery.
Yeah, these are treacherous times, he says. They should have a new lord who can keep the others straight, essentially. There's 300 lords, and he reckons that a bribe of about £1,000 each would suffice.
Yes, he says So the prince retorts £300,000.
He's corrected by Blackadder, £400,000.
And you see the prince puzzle over it and have to admit that, Blackadder might be right. Obviously can't work it out himself and is a bit embarrassed.
Yes, so he just goes along with it.
Blackadder then explains how the prince goes about appointing a lord.
Yeah.
This involved what?
Wears his robes and signs the Declaration of Ennoblement or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm. And we're down to the kitchen, and we see Blackadder appear in front of Mrs. Miggins. He's very proud of his new apparel until she points out what?
It's made of cat fur.
The Blackadder initially denies it, but Miggins has evidence.
Yeah, what he thought were medallion adornments are in fact cat collars with return to owner details engraved on them.
Mr. Frisky and things like that.
Yeah.
Back at the palace, both Blackadder and the prince are wearing their robes, and the regent has to correct him when Blackadder addresses him as my lord. Can you remember why?
Yes, because there's two lords, so he has to say my lords.
Blackadder assumes he's referring to both of them.
Yes, but no.
No, indeed. The prince introduces His Grace, the Lord Baldrick.
Blackadder asks if he might let loose. I think he says a short, violent exclamation.
Yes, and he's granted this wish.
He is, and he does.
Yes. Baldrick doesn't help his mood by telling Blackadder it's okay, you don't have to curtsy.
And there's worse news to follow.
What's that?
The £400,000. Well, he doesn't realise it's bad news initially, but the £400,000 has been given to Baldrick.
Yes, before we get downstairs to find out how Blackadder intends extracting the £400,000, the prince notes Blackadder's strange get-up.
He says he's going to a fancy dress party, I think. I can't remember what he said he was going to.
Yes, he's going to a fancy dress party as Lady Hamilton's pussy.
Okay.
So back to the £400,000. When he's told that Baldrick has it, his mood perks up again because he's confident he can get it back.
Yeah, down in the kitchen, he's beating Baldrick by smacking his head into the table and being reminded he has to say "my lord" at the end of every insult.
Baldrick claims he doesn't have the money anymore, but Blackadder can't think what on earth he could have spent it on until their gaze rests upon a massive turnip.
Yeah, Blackadder doesn't understand where Baldrick was able to find a turnip worth £400,000, but...
Well, Baldrick says, it didn't come cheap, he had to haggle.
Yeah, the assumption being he's haggled up.
Yes.
He calls it his dream turnip, and Blackadder wedges it on his head.
Yes. He then laments the situation he finds himself in and vows never to dabble in politics again.
And the credits roll.
We see the end credits. It's the last scene with Baldrick and underneath a turnip, and it turns into the pages of a book.
It's kind of like a playbill, like you would get in the theatre, I think.
So there we have it. I thought it was a very strong opening episode to the third season.
I watched it 3 times, I think. I think the first time, because we're watching it so soon after watching Blackadder 2, I think there's an adjustment. I think the comedy, there's a different tone, a different sort of feel to it. And going straight from 6 Blackadder 2s into one of these, it took a bit of time for me to kind of think, the jokes were funny, but just kind of get the feel of this.
Yeah, you have to understand the personalities and their position in society and how they're going to interact with each other.
Yeah, and I think they bear rewatching anyway. So if you looked at this and you thought, that's not as good as Blackadder 2, go back and watch it again, because I think that now that you've kind of got a handle on what's going on here, it's even better.
Yeah, no, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think Blackadder 3 may well be my favourite, but that could change as we rewatch.
Hugh Laurie has some fantastic moments. Even in just this episode, he's just really very good.
Oh, he's always very good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's just about us. Will we go through some production information, any trivia we might have?
Sure.
Okay, 17th of September 1987 was the original air date. Now, as we mentioned before, we'll leave some of the bigger stars to a point in the future. So we can start this week with Vincent Hanna, who played himself.
Well, no, he didn't. If you look at the credits, he played his great-great-great-grandfather.
Fair enough. Unfortunately, Mr. Hanna died in 1997, aged just 57. He was a political journalist, known for shows such as A Week in Politics, the election special, so Election 74, 83, 87, and a show called Midweek.
For someone who's a presenter rather than an actor, I thought he was superb in this.
Yes, because it's, from what I gather, it can be quite difficult to play yourself when you're at the cameras. I always remember Gordon Ramsay actually talking about that. He made some guest appearances somewhere and he said, well, just be yourself. But as soon as you're told to act like yourself, it's a tricky thing to do, I think.
It was very believable. It came across sort of flawlessly. And I think if you'd enjoyed, or if you'd been aware of him as a political commentator, it probably would give you an extra level of enjoyment to the scenes in this.
Definitely. Dennis Lill played Sir Talbot Buxomley, born in 1942. He has been in Batman, the 1989 movie, The Royal, Casualty, Outside Edge. Have you ever watched that? It's a gentle cricket drama with Josie Lawrence and a few other well-known faces.
I can't say I've watched it. I like Josie Lawrence on Whose Line Is It Anyway?
I don't know anything about cricket, but I did enjoy that. I'm a Last of the Summer Wine fan, that type of thing, so I enjoy that gentle humour sometimes.
The cricket's okay. It's like if you took baseball and added 4 days and more boredom.
He's also been in Only Fools and Horses, I think about 8 episodes, Rumple of the Bailey, Waterfront Beat, The Blackadder's Christmas Carol, and he was in about 6 episodes of Doctor Who, the 1977 run and in 1984, also in Survivors and The Regiment. Simon Osborne played Pitt the Younger. Now, I was sure he was another child actor, but looking him up, this is his only acting credit. Now, there was a TV show back in the 80s, and perhaps ran to the 90s, and Teabag.
Okay.
But a little boy or girl were collecting spoons, and I can't remember, but I was sure this was the actor.
It wasn't?
It wasn't, no. So this is, as I say, his only acting credit. He's got 2 other credits, both working on Sting projects, music documentary type thing.
Okay.
Where he won a Primetime Emmy.
Really?
Yeah, but 3 things. 1 in front of the camera, 2 sound mixing projects for Sting, and that's all he's done in this field.
Oh well, that's great. I wonder what else he's done. Maybe someone can fill us in.
Maybe he's on Twitter.
Maybe.
We should look out for him. If anyone knows where we can get a hold of Simon Osborne, let us know. Maybe we can follow him if he's still around.
I need somewhere to put my toast, to be honest.
Geoffrey McGivern played Ivor Biggins.
That's a familiar sounding name. Tell me about him.
Born in 1952. Very established actor. Doctors, Grantchester, EastEnders, Holby City, Episodes, Touch of Cloth, Armstrong and Miller, Stressed Eric, Smith and Jones, The Bill, Annie's Bar, A Bit of Fry and Laurie, Chelmsford 1, 2, 3. He was also the original voice of Ford Prefect in the radio dramatisation of Hitchhiker's Guide. And I think they've reworked it and he's come back recently in the last sort of decade or so to reprise his role. But we have seen him, we have chatted about him fairly recently.
Okay.
Because he plays Barry, or played Barry, the agent in Jonathan Creek.
Of course. On our companion show, the Jonathan Creek podcast.
Yep.
Yeah. The Touch of Cloth that you say was in, I enjoyed particularly the first series of that show.
Yeah, it's funny.
It's worth looking at, yeah.
Okay. Any other trivia you have for us?
I kind of used it all up at the start with the whole Regency thing, and you looked a bit bored the more I said about it. So
Okay, I've got a few points this week then. So the 24 Hours is a long time in politics is obviously a nod to the A Week is a long time in politics quote, normally attributed to Harold Wilson, the twice Labour Prime Minister.
Yeah.
But there's some doubt whether or not he did say that, but that's generally who people believe to be the originator.
Okay.
Also, at the time when Baldrick was knighted,
Yep.
it was impossible to strip a lord of his title. So throughout the rest of this season, Baldrick is a lord.
Fair enough.
And in real life, Tony Robinson was knighted in 2013. Rowan Atkinson has only been given a CBE. So,
Yeah, I think Tony Robinson's was for more than just his acting.
of course, yeah. We'll discuss Tony Robinson.
We will definitely.
Your favourite line this week?
Okay, I think it was the one that I pulled up during the episode.
Take a short holiday.
What?
Take a short holiday.
No.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, but the line that I pulled up earlier in the episode as being my favourite, which was about where the regent was told that if they took away his money, he wouldn't have any socks. He says, "I don't have any socks at the moment."
Okay.
I enjoyed that. What about you?
Yeah, the take a short holiday line.
That was your favourite?
Yep.
More than anti-distinctly minty?
Yeah, can't see it all that, so I'm sticking with the... Next time, we've got Ink and Incapability.
That's one that I remember from the first time I watched it. It's a great episode.
Okay, that's us. Do you want to...
Before we go, I suppose I should ask folk to rate and review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. If they want to talk to us about the episodes, blackadderpodcast.com. We do have a post up for every episode. Come in and share your favourite lines or your thoughts or your opinions about that. And you can get us on social media. We are at BlackadderPod on both Facebook and Twitter.
Okay, that's us. Until next time,
Cheerio.
bye-bye.